Tonight, I really wanted to share my family's cutlet recipe. This is something that my grandparents made a whole lot when I was really little. It's been a really long time since I've eaten these. I remember they were my sister's absolute favorite, and they're surprisingly easy to make. There's quite a few steps involved, but I wouldn't call any of it difficult, just a little bit tedious. But it's absolutely worth it. These are so delicious, and my house smells so good. They are soft on the inside and they're crispy on the outside, and everybody's just absolutely gonna love these. These are so fantastic, and I hope you guys love them as much as I do. So we're gonna start with a couple of things. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna steam our potatoes. And I've got this steaming basket that just fits right on top of my pot. But if you don't have one of those, you don't have to go out and buy it. You can also get this type of steaming basket. It's got these little feet on the bottom, and it kind of expands to any pot size. This was probably $8 or $9 on Amazon. So that's the one I would recommend if you don't already have a steaming basket. The next thing we're gonna do is we're just gonna start browning our ground beef. So I've got about 1 pound of ground beef here. And we're just gonna let this sit for a couple of minutes before we chop it up and get everything browned. But while these are cooking, we're gonna go start chopping our veggies. So our ground beef and potatoes are cooking. We're gonna go ahead and get started on chopping our veggies. I've actually never made this before. I'm following my grandparents' recipe, and this recipe is actually for 3 pounds of ground beef, but there's only 2 of us, so I'm not making that much food. So I'm kind of, minimizing as I go. I am gonna go ahead and do a little under half of this large onion, and that'll be for 1 pound of ground beef. And we're just gonna kind of chop this up pretty small. I want a pretty small dice, but it doesn't have to be a super fine mince by any means. You know what, I'm gonna go down a little bit. I think we're gonna do about 1/3 of this large onion. That would be just under 1 small onion, if that's what you were using. I think you could probably use shallots for this. I would probably do 2 shallots for that same amount. And then we're gonna do just a little bit of ginger. I'm probably gonna do just a tiny little 1/2-inch piece here. And then this we do want a really fine mince on. So I'm gonna just slice it into super thin planks. And a really sharp knife will be really helpful here because ginger is so fibrous. A sharp knife just cuts through it a lot nicer. And then I'm just gonna stack these up. And I'm gonna slice this really thin again. And then we're gonna line everything up one more time. And I'm just gonna kind of chop down. And this probably doesn't have to be totally perfect, but these are gonna get all mixed together with the ground beef and the potatoes. And then they're gonna be shaped into, cutlets. So just the finer you can get it, kind of the better it is. You can also probably use ginger paste here, maybe 1/2 teaspoon of ginger paste for 1 pound of ground beef. I'm gonna add that into my bowl. And then we're also gonna do a few garlic cloves. Let's do those 4. I don't usually have fresh garlic in the house, but I have this it's just like already peeled garlic cloves. I just keep that bag in the freezer. So whenever I want to use fresh garlic instead of the jarred garlic, I go for that. It's just a little bit closer to fresh. And these I'm just gonna smash. And then these will chop up really nicely. Same thing, again, you could probably use garlic paste here. Probably about the same amount, 1/2 teaspoon. I'm just going to add this into the same bowl. And then the last thing we're going to cut up is some jalapeno. This is kind of a use what you want sort of situation. The original recipe for 3 pounds of ground beef calls for 1 jalapeno, and I'm guessing it's probably a larger jalapeno. So I think I'm going to do half of this medium jalapeno. And this we also want a pretty fine dice so that it gets really evenly mixed. All right, and that is all chopped. I'm going to add this into my same bowl. And the next thing we're going to do is we are going to grind up some spices. Our spices are going to be super simple. We're going to do about half a stick of cinnamon. I get basically all of my Indian spices from the Asian store, from the Indian store. I just went ahead and broken one of those in half. We're going to do 2 or 3 whole cardamom. Mine are all pretty small, so I'm going to do 3. And then we're going to do about a half a teaspoon of whole black pepper. And then we're also going to do about a half a teaspoon of whole cloves. You could probably use, I'm sure there's nothing wrong with using pre-ground cinnamon, pre-ground black pepper. For pre-ground cinnamon, maybe a 1/4 teaspoon, and for the pre-ground pepper, probably about the same, 1/4 to a half a teaspoon, maybe half a teaspoon of the black pepper. And we're just going to grind that up until those are all a very fine powder. Ooh, I'm trying not to sneeze now. I sniffed it. Our spices are ground up very nicely. So we are going to go ahead and add our spices and then all of our onion and ginger, garlic, and jalapeno to the ground beef. Our ground beef is nicely browned. I'm going to go ahead and add in all of our cut up veggies. And then I'm also going to add in all of the spices we just mixed together. And I'm going to give that a good mix, and these are going to cook for just a few more minutes until the onions are translucent. I'm going to add a tiny bit more oil to this. All right, we're going to let that sit for a few minutes. And while we're over here, we are also going to check on our steamed potatoes and see how those are coming along. We want these to be cooked all the way through. I'm going to grab the bigger one. And I can't quite pierce it very far with a fork. So it's definitely getting there, but it is not cooked all the way through. I'll just check the small one. That's about the same. I'm going to let those potatoes cook probably for about 10 more minutes, and then we'll be back to check on those. So our ground beef mixture is done, and it's actually been cooling down for a little while. Our potatoes have just come out and they've cooled down a little bit too. So I'm going to go ahead and peel these. Now I don't actually know how much it matters. The recipe said to steam these whole, wash them, steam them, and then peel them afterwards. I just don't know. It might work just fine if you want to peel them and cut them up and boil them first, but they might get a little too watery if you do it that way. I'm really not sure. This is, like I said, my very first time making this, so I'm just trying to follow the recipe as closely as I can. These are still a little hot, but the peel is coming off pretty easily. And as I'm peeling these, I'm seeing that these really are surprisingly dry for just being steamed. I haven't really steamed potatoes before. So boiling them might add a little bit too much liquid into the mixture, and I fear that our cutlets won't have enough structural integrity if we were to boil these. I do think, however, that you could conceivably microwave them, wrap them up in a wet paper towel, and then kind of mic them until they're soft all the way through. So these are fully peeled. I'm just gonna give these a quick mash with a fork. And it doesn't have to be totally perfect. We wanna leave a few pieces, and then some of this will kind of get a little more broken down once we're mixing it with the meat. All right, I've got my potato mix here. I'm gonna go ahead and add in some of this meat mixture. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna add it all, but I just wanna mix this together and see what it kind of looks like. And this has cooled down quite a bit. I'm gonna just mix this with my hands because I kind of need to get a feel for what the whole thing is gonna feel like. I need to make sure it's really shapeable. Yeah, you know what? I am gonna go ahead and just add in the rest of this meat. And this is actually coming together really, really nicely. I'm really happy with how this is looking. I'm gonna go ahead and I think I'm gonna start shaping these. Now, if the mixture is not holding together, we can mix in some egg yolk to kind of give it a little bit more structure. But if you don't mix in any egg yolk, then you can taste this now and make sure it is what you want it to be. I am gonna taste it. I need to add a little bit of salt to this. I'm gonna add probably about half a teaspoon of salt. And then I'm gonna give that one more really good mix. I think that's better. Perfect, half a teaspoon of salt. All right, now we're gonna shape these. And I haven't done this before with any sort of meat mixture like this. It's kind of like meatballs, I guess. And the shape probably doesn't really matter. Most people would probably just do a circle. I think there's nothing wrong with a circle. You do want to give it some thickness, probably about 1 centimeter of thickness. And then if I can, I'm gonna shape this into kind of like a teardrop shape, because that's how my grandparents always did it when I was growing up. They actually have a mold for this. Okay, it's kind of coming together, but it's not holding together as much as I wish it was. So I'm just gonna throw that back in there, and I am going to add in, I think I'm gonna add an entire egg yolk into this and see how that holds it together. So I just wanna do the egg yolk. I'm not gonna do the white at all. And if you've never separated an egg while it's still in the shell, the easiest way I found is to, if you can, get a really nice clean break at about the halfway point, and then try and keep the yolk in the shell, and the white will just kind of run off the edge, and it'll eventually separate and break. And then I just do that over and over and over again, just trying to catch only the yolk. And that's it. I'm going to drop that in. The other way, of course, is to just reach in and grab the yolk with your hands. That usually works really well. And I'll scramble this up for my dog later. All right, I'm just gonna mix this yolk in. So I'm just gonna take, I don't know, maybe 3 tablespoons. Oh yeah, I can already tell this is so much better. And I'm gonna try to give it this little teardrop shape. This is just the cutlet shape in my house, but there's nothing wrong with round. This is not too bad. And there's our first cutlet. So I'm going to make all of these, and then we are going to bread and fry them. All of my cutlets are shaped. It turned out the round was much easier than the teardrop, but next time I make these, I will have to get a mold, because I think I like the teardrop shape a little bit better, just emotionally. Next, we are going to bread these and fry them on the stove. So I've got 1 egg that I've beat really, really well. I don't have any white streaks left in here. And I've mixed this with about 1 tablespoon of water. And then the breadcrumbs, it's just these plain breadcrumbs. You don't want to use panko or anything like that. You could use, I'm sure you could use gluten-free breadcrumbs for this, but those tend to be larger pieces. So I might recommend just breaking them up into this really fine breadcrumb texture if you're using gluten-free breadcrumbs. And then we're just going to dip this in the egg mixture. and then set it in the breadcrumbs. And if you do the one hand wet, one hand dry successfully, then absolutely feel free to do that. It never works for me. I'd rather just get a little messy and get it done as quickly as I can. And you really want to press the breadcrumbs into the cutlet, and I'm kind of reshaping it as I go because I kind of messed it up a little bit. And that's it. It's got a really thin layer of breadcrumbs that's going to fry up really, really quickly. And we're just going to get these all coated. And this is my last cutlet. I want to stress one more time, it's really important that as you're putting the breadcrumbs on, you're really pushing the breadcrumbs into the cutlet. You shouldn't have any loose breadcrumbs falling off. This is a really thin layer of breadcrumbs. And these are all ready to fry. I'm going to wash my hands, get my pan heated up, and we're going to fry these in just a little bit of oil. All right, so for frying these, I've added about 1/2 inch of oil to my pan, and I've heated this up on kind of a medium high. And the way I'm checking if it's ready is I'm just starting to put one in, and it's starting to bubble immediately. So I'm going to go ahead and set a few of these in. And one reason it's really important to not crowd your pan when you're frying is because as you put these in the oil, these will actually cool the oil down and slow down the frying process for the first, 30 seconds to a minute that they're in here. So I'm just going to cook about 5 at a time. And this is going to happen really fast according to the recipe. All we're doing is we're just going to let it cook until it's brown. I'm going to let it sit for about 30 seconds and then we'll see what it looks like on the other side. All right, so that wasn't actually super fast. These took probably 2-ish minutes on the first side. I'm going to go ahead and get these flipped. And these are a little bit fragile, which is why I'm using a spatula and tongs. And then when you're flipping these, make sure you try and flip them away from you so that you don't get splattered with oil too much. I'm going to let those sit for probably the same amount of time, about 2 minutes. You can see my oil is bubbling quite a bit now, so it's gotten all the way back up to temperature. I'm going to let these sit on this side for 1.5 to 2 minutes, and then we are going to fry the rest of these up. So these are all done frying. They fried up mostly nicely, but they definitely kind of started to fall apart near the end there. I think if I had added a little bit more egg yolk or maybe even some whole egg into the mixture, I think that would have solidified it really nicely. Maybe it just wasn't quite sticky enough when I was mixing it all together. But I will say these smell fantastic, and I'm super, super excited to try these. I have a vague memory of my grandfather dipping these in ketchup, so I'm just gonna try it with that. It feels a little weird putting ketchup on Indian food, but we're gonna do it anyways. This one came together really nicely. This one's almost perfect. And it's super nicely cooked on the inside. It's nice and hot, so the egg that was in there cooked all the way through. I think I have to try it without ketchup first. This smells so good. It's a little hot. Cheers. That is fantastic. That is almost exactly what I remember. It is crispy on the outside, but it's just a little bit light. And I was a little worried because I didn't add a whole lot of spices, but there's so much flavor in here. This tastes so good. I'm gonna try it with a little bit of ketchup now. I'll probably eat this with ketchup. This is such a wonderful, wonderful snack. If you make enough, I'm sure you could have this as a meal. We're probably gonna eat this entire plate tonight though. This is so wonderful. This tastes like my childhood. I can't wait to share this with the rest of my family. It's been so long since we have had cutlets, so I think everybody's going to be really happy to eat these again.